The carriage swayed violently over the uneven stones of the road, and Lady Beatrice Ashford kept her hands firmly clasped in her lap, forcing herself to breathe steadily. Through the small window, she watched the Hertfordshire landscape gradually transform, the gentle hills giving way to denser woods. Each rotation of the wheels brought her closer to her public humiliation, carefully orchestrated by those who should have protected her. Just imagine his expression when you step out of the carriage. The cruel voice of her cousin Percival still echoed in her mind, accompanied by Lavinia's sharp giggles. The great Marcus Thornton, textile magnate, expecting a suitable bride and receiving, well, you. Beatrice closed her eyes, feeling the familiar blush of shame creep up her neck. Since being orphaned at 15, she had been sent to live with her late father's cousins. For 6 long years, she had endured cutting remarks, disguised laughter, and systematic exclusion from all important social events. Her crime was simple and irremediable. Her body did not conform to society's delicate standards. Where other young ladies displayed wasp waists and slender silhouettes, she possessed generous curves and a presence her Aunt Eugenia described as altogether too substantial. The letter that had precipitated this journey rested within her velvet reticule. Marcus Thornton, a man who had built his fortune through ingenuity and hard work rather than inheritance, had written to the Ashfords requesting a proper introduction to a young lady of good family. Percival, always eager to ridicule Beatrice while feigning charity, had decided this would be his masterpiece of cruelty. "We shall send Beatrice," he had announced during dinner 3 weeks prior, raising his wine glass as if proposing a brilliant toast. After all, Mr. Thornton did not specify what kind of lady he desired. It will be a valuable lesson for both. He will learn to be more specific in his requests, and dear cousin will learn her definitive place in the world. Beatrice clenched her fingers tighter, feeling her nails press against her skin through her kid gloves. She had considered refusing, of course, but refusing would mean continuing to live under the Ashfords' roof, enduring infinitely more years of daily humiliation. At least this humiliation would be public, final. Perhaps after her rejection, her cousins would tire of her completely and send her to some remote estate where she could live in relative peace. The carriage slowed and Beatrice's heart quickened proportionally. Through the window, she spied the imposing gates of the Thornton estate. They were not the ancient wrought-iron gates of traditional aristocratic properties, but new structures of polished steel, decorated with modern geometric patterns that reflected the afternoon sun. Beyond them, a gravel path wound through impeccably kept gardens to a mansion that combined classical elements with an unequivocally contemporary grandeur. The coachman, hired specifically for this journey, halted the horses before the main entrance. Beatrice took a deep breath, adjusting the cuffs of her navy blue traveling dress. Her aunt had insisted she wear her plainest clothes naturally. "There's no need to waste fine fabric on a foolish errand," she had declared. The carriage door opened and Beatrice accepted the gloved hand of the waiting footman. As she descended, she noted the carefully neutral expression on the man's face, the kind of professional mask that well-trained servants learn to wear. How many more times would she see that expression today? The polite neutrality that barely disguised shock or, worse still, pity. The mansion's main door swung open, and Beatrice mentally braced herself. This was the moment. Marcus Thornton would emerge, see her ample and substantial figure and basic courtesy would battle outrage on his features. He would send a chilling letter to the Ashfords, expressing his indignation at the insult, and she would return to face her cousin's malicious triumph. But the man who emerged from the mansion did not match the image she had constructed. Marcus Thornton was tall, with broad shoulders that strained the fabric of his perfectly tailored coat. His dark brown hair was swept back, revealing a face of strong masculine features, with lines around his eyes that suggested a man who had spent considerable time outdoors. He must be approximately 35, Beatrice calculated, and there was a contained energy about him, a presence that commanded attention. He descended the marble steps with decisive strides, and Beatrice lifted her chin, determined to face her rejection with dignity. But then something extraordinary happened. Marcus Thornton stopped before her, and before Beatrice could process his intentions, the man knelt on the gravel. His eyes, a deep forest moss green, fixed on hers with an intensity that left her breathless. "Lady Beatrice," he said, and his voice possessed a rich, deep quality that reverberated through her. "For years, I have sought a real woman, not a society doll. You have the courage to come here despite their cruelty. Will you marry me?" Beatrice felt the world tilt dizzily. Her legs trembled, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she would faint right there. His words made no sense. Was it some cruel game? A mockery even more elaborate than the one orchestrated by her cousins? "Mr. Thornton, she began, her voice coming out hoarse. "I know precisely what your cousins intended," he interrupted softly, drawing something from his waistcoat pocket. Sunlight caught the gleam of gold and precious stones. A ring. "I received an anonymous letter 3 days ago, alerting me to the nature of this introduction, revealing it as a cruel farce intended to humiliate us both." He held the ring between his fingers, a magnificent object with a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "This ring belonged to my mother. She was a woman of extraordinary strength, who raised 5 children alone after my father died in a dock accident. She taught me that a person's true worth lies not in their conformity to society's arbitrary standards, but in their character and courage." Beatrice stared at the man kneeling before her, her mind struggling to comprehend. "Your mother? 5 children alone?" "My family was not born with a silver spoon, Lady Beatrice. I built this fortune through work, not inheritance, and in doing so, I learned to recognize genuine strength when I see it." His eyes swept over her face, not with the disdain she expected, but with something that seemed dangerously close to admiration. "You traveled all across Hertfordshire, knowing you were coming to your own humiliation. You did so because the alternative was to remain in a home where you are not valued. That, my lady, is courage." "But you do not know me," Beatrice whispered, barely daring to believe what she was hearing. "How can you?" "I know enough. I know you lost your parents young. I know you survived 6 years under a hostile roof without losing your dignity. And I know," he rose gracefully, holding the ring aloft between them, "that you are precisely the woman I have sought. I do not desire a wife who faints at the slightest setback or who cares only for superficial appearances. I desire a partner with substance, with real resilience." Tears stung Beatrice's eyes, but she held them back. "This could simply be another form of cruelty, sir." "Then allow me to prove otherwise." Marcus extended the ring to her. "You need not answer now. Stay in my home as a guest for as long as you need. Get to know me. Allow me to truly know you. And then decide if you believe in the sincerity of my words." Beatrice looked at the ring, then at his face, searching for signs of deceit or mockery. She found only serene certainty and something more, something that made her heart beat dangerously fast. There was determination in those green eyes, yes, but also a carefully guarded vulnerability, as if he too risked something precious in this moment. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Why would you do this?" Marcus smiled, and the expression transformed his stern face into something surprisingly warm. "Because I have spent too long building a fortune and not enough building a life. Because I am tired of women who see me only as a means to social ascent. And because," he stepped closer, his voice lowering intimately, "there is something in your eyes, Lady Beatrice, a silent strength that I recognize because I see it reflected in my own mirror each morning, the strength of survivors." Beatrice's hand trembled slightly as she accepted Marcus's silent invitation to enter the mansion. He did not immediately offer his arm, she noticed, but remained close enough for her to feel his comforting presence as they ascended the marble steps. It was a subtle gesture of consideration, allowing her to maintain her composure without forcing an intimacy they had not yet established. The entrance hall of Thornton Manor was a revelation. Where traditional aristocratic properties boasted centuries of dusty ancestral portraits and inherited furniture, this space contained modernity. The high ceiling was adorned with plasterwork depicting not mythological scenes, but elegant geometric patterns. A wide staircase curved gracefully to the upper floor, its polished mahogany banister reflecting the light streaming in through strategically placed windows. "My house was built only 8 years ago," Marcus explained, following her admiring gaze. I had the freedom to incorporate both beauty and practicality, not being tied to the traditions of past generations. A middle-aged woman emerged from a side corridor, her erect posture and impeccable attire immediately identifying her as the housekeeper. Her grey hair was pulled back into a severe bun, but her brown eyes possessed a warmth that immediately contradicted the austerity of her appearance. "Lady Beatrice, allow me to introduce Mrs. Hardcastle, my housekeeper, and the organizing force that keeps this house running with admirable efficiency." Marcus gestured respectfully to the woman. "Mrs. Hardcastle, Lady Beatrice Ashford will be our guest for an indefinite period. Please ensure that the blue suite is prepared with every necessary comfort." The housekeeper's experienced eyes swept over Beatrice once, a quick but thorough assessment. Beatrice instinctively braced herself for the judgment that invariably followed such appraisals. But Mrs. Hardcastle simply curtsied respectfully, and when she raised her eyes again, there was genuine approval in her gaze. "It will be a pleasure, sir. Lady Beatrice, welcome to Thornton Manor. I will have your luggage taken to your chambers immediately." She hesitated briefly, then added with an unexpected maternal softness, "I imagined you might wish to refresh yourself after your journey before dinner. I shall arrange for a warm bath and tea in your rooms, should that be to your liking." Beatrice felt a knot tighten in her throat. Such simple considerations had been scarce in the past 6 years. "You are very kind, Mrs. Hardcastle. I thank you deeply." "The blue suite has a lovely view of the Oriental Gardens," Marcus added, turning to Beatrice. "I thought you might appreciate the tranquility. The gardens were designed by my youngest sister, Margaret. She has a remarkable talent for creating spaces that appear both cultivated and natural." "Your sister?" Beatrice repeated, latching onto this detail about his family. A genuine smile lit Marcus's face. "The youngest of 5. She lives here with me, along with my sister Cordelia and her husband. My 2 brothers, Edmund and Henry, manage our operations in Manchester and Liverpool, respectively." Margaret insisted on transforming every available inch of land into something beautiful. I must admit, her talent vastly exceeded my initial expectations. As Mrs. Hardcastle withdrew to supervise the preparations, Marcus finally offered Beatrice his arm. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted it, allowing him to guide her through a wide corridor decorated with paintings that captured English landscapes with vibrant colors and bold brushstrokes. "I do not collect art for investment or prestige," Marcus commented, noticing her interest. "I acquire only pieces that genuinely move me. I believe that if something does not bring joy or significant contemplation, it does not deserve a place in our daily environment." He led her to a library that stole Beatrice's breath away. The walls were lined with dark oak bookshelves from floor to high ceiling, filled with volumes in varied bindings. It was not the uniform, rarely touched collection of traditional aristocratic libraries, but an eclectic compilation that evinced real use. Some books displayed worn spines, others had bookmarks protruding from between their pages. "This is my refuge," Marcus admitted, gently releasing her arm and gesturing for her to explore freely. "When the pressures of business or society become excessive, I retreat here." Beatrice approached the shelves, her fingers reverently tracing the spines. There were volumes on philosophy, natural history, classical and contemporary literature, treatises on engineering and economics. "Your collection is extraordinary and evidently well used. Books should not be merely decorative." Marcus moved closer to her, withdrawing a volume with a worn red leather cover. "This is my copy of Sense and Sensibility. My mother read it to us when we were young, though we could scarcely afford such a luxury. She insisted that education and culture were not exclusive privileges of those born with a silver spoon." Beatrice accepted the book when he offered it, feeling the weight of the history contained both within its pages and its personal significance to him. "Your mother seems to have been an extraordinary woman. She was the most extraordinary person I have ever known." Marcus's voice carried deep reverence. "She worked as a seamstress, often until the early hours of the morning, to ensure we had not only food and shelter, but proper schooling. When I began my first commercial venture at 19, it was with money she had secretly saved for years." He moved to a wide window that offered a view of the gardens he had mentioned. Beatrice joined him, and for a moment they stood in companionable silence, observing the flowers arranged in patterns that appeared both planned and organic. "Lady Beatrice," Marcus said finally, his voice low but charged with intensity, "I need you to understand something fundamental about my proposal." She turned to face him, her heart quickening again. In the soft light filtered through the damask curtains, she could see the lines of determination etched on his face, but also a carefully guarded vulnerability. "I do not make this offer out of pity or misplaced charity," he continued, meeting her eyes directly. "Nor do I make it from romantic impulse based on ignorance of who you truly are. I make it because I recognize in you qualities I value above all others, qualities I have sought unsuccessfully for years." "But you do not know me," Beatrice protested softly, repeating her earlier objection. "How can you be certain of something like this?" Marcus turned fully to her, and Beatrice realized how close they now stood. She could see the golden flecks in his green eyes, the faint scar cut on his left temple. "I know more than you imagine. Before responding to the Ashfords' request, I made discreet inquiries. I learned of your dedication to educating the servants' children on your previous estate, before your parents' death. I learned how you managed your mother's charitable works even when so young. I learned that, after your cousins assumed your guardianship, you attempted to continue these activities until they deliberately forbade you." Beatrice felt the heat rise in her cheeks. "You investigated my life." "I investigated your conduct and character, yes." He showed no shame at the admission. "I am a man of business, Lady Beatrice. I do not make significant decisions based on assumptions, and everything I discovered confirmed my initial impression upon reading the anonymous letter that alerted me to your cousin's intentions." "The anonymous letter," Beatrice murmured, her mind returning to that curious detail. "Who would write you such a thing?" "I suspect someone in your own household, possibly a servant disturbed by the cruelty they witnessed." Marcus paused. "The letter not only informed me of the planned farce, but also included observations about your character that piqued my curiosity. It described a young lady who bore daily humiliations with silent dignity, who showed kindness to servants even when deprived of similar kindness, who maintained inner strength despite years of deplorable treatment." Tears stung Beatrice's eyes again, but this time they were not from shame or pain, but from something dangerously close to hope. "And that was enough for you? Second-hand reports of my actions? It was enough to pique my interest. It was enough to make me wish to meet you personally." He extended his hand, stopping just short of touching her arm as if asking for silent permission. When she did not draw away, his fingers rested gently on her sleeve. "But what convinced me completely was seeing your expression when you stepped out of the carriage, prepared for humiliation, yet determined to face it with dignity. That, my lady, is true courage." "Or perhaps simply despair," Beatrice whispered. "Courage and despair often walk hand in hand." Marcus smiled sadly. "Do you believe I do not know that combination? When I took over my first warehouse at 19, I faced ridicule from established merchants who saw in me only an arrogant young man of no proper birth. I was desperate and courageous simultaneously, and that combination forged me into who I am today." A soft knock at the door interrupted the intense moment. Mrs. Hardcastle entered discreetly. "Forgive the intrusion, sir, but Lady Beatrice's chambers are ready, and Lady Margaret has returned from her morning ride. She awaits eagerly to meet your guest." Marcus stepped back respectfully, and Beatrice felt both relief and disappointment at the break in their growing intimacy. "Excellent, Lady Beatrice. Will you permit my sister to keep you company while you settle in? She can be exuberantly enthusiastic, I must warn you, but her heart is genuinely kind." Before Beatrice could respond, a cheerful voice echoed down the corridor. "Marcus, Mrs. Hardcastle said we have a guest. Please tell me you finally—" A young woman emerged at the library entrance, stopping abruptly upon seeing Beatrice. She was small and delicate, with light brown hair pulled back in a casual arrangement that suggested practicality more than vanity. Her cheeks were flushed, possibly from recent exercise, and there was dirt under her fingernails, evidence of practical work in the gardens. But it was her eyes that captured Beatrice's attention, large and expressive, sparkling with undisguised curiosity. "Lady Beatrice." Marcus made the introductions with evident affection. "Allow me to present my sister, Lady Margaret Thornton. Margaret, Lady Beatrice Ashford, whom I hope to convince to become a permanent part of our family." Margaret practically bounded forward, any pretense of formal decorum dissolving into genuine enthusiasm. "Oh, I am absolutely delighted. Marcus has been terribly lonely, though he'll never admit it." She impulsively took Beatrice's hands. "You must tell me everything about yourself over tea. We have so much to talk about." And so, surrounded by the unexpected warmth of this unconventional family, Beatrice felt the first fissures form in the protective wall she had built around her heart during 6 long years of isolation. The blue suite surpassed any expectations Beatrice might have harbored. The room was spacious without being oppressively grand, decorated in shades of sky blue and cream that created an atmosphere of serene tranquility. But it was the view through the wide windows that truly took her breath away. Margaret's oriental gardens stretched out in waves of color and form, flower beds interspersed with meticulously pruned shrubs and stone paths that wound between small fountains and discreetly placed benches. "It's magnificent, isn't it?" Margaret asked, joining Beatrice by the window. She had insisted on personally accompanying her to the chambers, dismissing Mrs. Hardcastle with youthful eagerness. "I spent 3 years developing the design. Marcus initially thought I was wasting time on feminine follies, but when he saw the final result, he admitted he had underestimated my vision." Beatrice smiled at Margaret's affectionately ironic imitation of her brother's voice. "Your dedication is evident in every detail. There is a harmony in the arrangements that transcends mere decoration." "Oh, I like you immensely already," Margaret declared, impulsively squeezing Beatrice's arm. "Most people offer empty compliments, but you truly observed, I can tell." She gently pulled Beatrice towards a set of armchairs arranged near the fireplace. "Come, let us sit while your bath is prepared. We must get to know each other properly." Beatrice allowed herself to be guided, still processing the spontaneous kindness of this young woman. For years, interactions with other ladies her age had been characterized by frosty cordiality at best, open disdain at worst. Margaret's openness was simultaneously refreshing and slightly disconcerting. "I must admit," Margaret began, settling into her armchair with an informality that would have horrified Aunt Eugenia, "that I am absolutely delighted by Marcus's audacity. He may seem all seriousness and decorum in business, but there is a deeply ingrained romanticism in him that he rarely permits himself to express." "Romanticism," Beatrice repeated, unable to suppress her skepticism. "Your brother conducted investigations into my life and character before even meeting me. That hardly seems romantic." "Ah, but you do not understand." Margaret leaned forward, her eyes shining with fervor. "Marcus applies the same meticulous diligence to everything he values. When he decided to expand his business into textiles, he spent an entire year studying every aspect of the industry before investing a single penny. When he wanted to create these gardens for me, he consulted 3 different landscape architects and read countless volumes on horticulture. His investigation into you was not cold or calculating. It was his way of protecting something he was already beginning to value." Beatrice considered this, her perspective subtly shifting. "He mentioned an anonymous letter. Yes, that letter caused a remarkable transformation in him." Margaret rose, moving to a small table where Mrs. Hardcastle had provided tea and delicate lemon biscuits. She poured 2 cups with practical familiarity. "Marcus showed it to Cordelia and me. Whoever wrote it clearly esteemed you and was genuinely concerned about the treatment you were receiving." Accepting the cup of tea, Beatrice allowed herself to consider this possibility. Who in the Ashford household would have shown such concern? The maids kept a careful distance, no doubt instructed by her aunt. The butler, Mr. Pemberton, had always been correct but distant. But there was the young chambermaid, Mary, who occasionally showed furtive kindness, a quick smile or extra assistance when dressing Beatrice for events from which she would subsequently be excluded. "The letter described you as someone who bore indignity with grace," Margaret continued softly. "Someone who showed kindness even when deprived of it. Marcus was deeply moved. He told me he wished to meet a woman capable of maintaining humanity in circumstances that would have embittered others. Your brother sees virtues where perhaps there is only resignation, Beatrice murmured, gazing at the amber liquid in her cup. Nonsense! Margaret's exclamation was so sudden and emphatic that Beatrice looked up in surprise. Forgive my frankness, but I must contradict such self-sabotage. Resignation is passive, a surrender of the spirit. You traveled here knowing what awaited you. That is not resignation. It is determination to face difficult circumstances on your own terms. Before Beatrice could respond, a knock at the door announced the arrival of maids carrying buckets of hot water. Margaret supervised the bath preparations with efficiency that revealed practical experience, a stark contrast to traditional aristocratic ladies who would never involve themselves in such domestic matters. When they were finally alone again, Margaret helped Beatrice remove her travelling coat, her nimble fingers working the buttons with ease. I must confess something, she said as she worked. Marcus isn't the only one who did his research. As soon as he mentioned your coming, I made my own discreet inquiries. Beatrice turned to face her, uncertain whether to feel violated or intrigued. I discovered, Margaret continued, meeting her eyes without hesitation, that after your mother's death you continued her charitable works even while in deep mourning, that you educated the children of servants and estate workers, teaching them not only basic reading, but literature and history, that when an epidemic of fever struck the nearby village, you personally helped care for the sick, without concern for your own safety or reputation. How do you know? Beatrice began. I have correspondence, Margaret said simply. Women who, like myself, find satisfaction in activities society deems inappropriate for our positions. One of them lives in your old region and remembered your family well. She placed her hands gently on Beatrice's shoulders. So do not believe you are merely tolerated here on my brother's whim. You are wanted, valued, and I can say with certainty that you are already admired. Tears that Beatrice had held back all afternoon finally overflowed. Margaret offered no false comforts or empty platitudes. She simply embraced Beatrice firmly, allowing her to finally release years of accumulated pain. When the tears finally ceased, Beatrice pulled away, feeling simultaneously exhausted and strangely purified. Forgive me. I am not usually so. Human? Margaret suggested gently. Emotional? Vulnerable? She offered her own embroidered handkerchief. All admirable qualities assured by years of forced repression. The bath that followed was luxurious in ways Beatrice had forgotten were possible. The water was perfectly heated, scented with lavender and rosemary. Margaret insisted on remaining, chatting animatedly about the gardens, about her sister Cordelia, whom Beatrice would meet at dinner, about the inhabitants of the estate and surrounding region. Our social circle is intentionally eclectic, Margaret explained, as Beatrice relaxed in the comforting water. Marcus refuses to limit his associations only to those of proper birth. We have merchants dining alongside barons, architects conversing with dukes. It initially caused considerable scandal, naturally. But Marcus simply declares that he built his fortune through merit, not birth, and expects those who frequent his home to respect the same philosophy. And they respect that? Beatrice asked, genuinely curious. Most do. Those who cannot overcome their prejudices simply cease to be invited. Margaret smiled mischievously. Marcus can be remarkably unyielding when it comes to his principles. After the bath, Margaret helped Beatrice dress for dinner, producing from her own wardrobe an evening gown of emerald green silk. Please wear this, it will be perfect with your eyes. Beatrice hesitated, her hand touching the luxurious fabric. I cannot accept. You can, and you must. Consider it a loan between friends if that eases your conscience. Margaret was already unbuttoning the simple dress Beatrice had brought. Besides, I wish to see Marcus's expression when he sees you properly dressed. He will try to maintain his composure naturally, but his eyes always betray him. The dress fit surprisingly well, though Margaret had to adjust a few pins discreetly. As she worked, she maintained a constant flow of conversation, seemingly determined to make Beatrice feel completely at ease. Cordelia is eager to meet you. she mentioned as she arranged Beatrice's hair in a simple but elegant style. "She married Mr. Julian Whitmore, the second son of a Viscount, 2 years ago. Julian manages Marcus's legal affairs and has become an integral part of our family." "Your family seems extraordinarily close," Beatrice observed. "Our mother taught us that family isn't defined solely by blood, but by loyalty and true affection." Margaret fastened a final hairpin, then stepped back to admire her work. "She used to say we had faced enough adversity together to understand the true value of mutual support." A knock at the door revealed Mrs. Hardcastle, coming to announce that dinner would be served shortly. Her gaze approved of the result of Margaret's ministrations. "Lady Beatrice, you are absolutely charming. The master awaits in the downstairs drawing room." Descending the staircase beside Margaret, Beatrice felt renewed nervousness clench her stomach. The afternoon had been unexpectedly comforting, but now she would face Marcus again, this time in the context of a formal dinner with his family. Marcus awaited in the vestibule, conversing with a tall, scholarly-looking man whom Beatrice presumed to be Julian Whitmore. When he heard their footsteps on the stairs, he looked up, and Beatrice witnessed exactly what Margaret had predicted. For a fraction of a second, his carefully maintained composure wavered, his eyes widening slightly as he watched her descend. But he recovered quickly, approaching with an elegant stride to meet her at the base of the staircase. "Lady Beatrice," he said, his voice slightly more husky than before, "you are absolutely radiant. The green complements your coloring perfectly." "Your sister deserves all the credit," Beatrice replied, aware of the blush rising in her cheeks under his admiring gaze. "My sister has excellent taste," Marcus agreed, offering her his arm. "But true beauty cannot be created, only appropriately enhanced." As he guided her towards the dining room, Beatrice allowed herself, for the first time in years, to consider the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, her future could be something beyond solitary resignation. Surrounded by the warmth of this extraordinary family, with Marcus's quiet strength at her side, she began to glimpse a life she had thought eternally beyond her reach. Dinner at Thornton Manor proved to be an experience that defied all the social conventions Beatrice had been taught to expect. The dining room was spacious, yet welcoming, illuminated not only by crystal chandeliers, but also by modern lamps strategically placed to create an intimate atmosphere without oppressive darkness. The table, though large enough to seat 12 comfortably, was set for only 6, creating a closeness that encouraged genuine conversation rather than distant formality. Cordelia Whitmore shared Margaret's delicate physique, but where the younger sister possessed an effervescent energy, Cordelia exhibited serene grace. Her dark brown hair was arranged in an elegant but unostentatious style, and her hazel eyes observed Beatrice with penetrating intelligence, tempered by evident kindness. Her husband, Julian, possessed the appearance of a scholar, with thin-rimmed spectacles and quiet manners that immediately put Beatrice at ease. "Lady Beatrice," Cordelia said when Marcus made the introductions, "what a pleasure to finally meet you." Marcus has been mysteriously reticent about details, but Margaret thankfully does not share such restraint. "I am not reticent, merely appropriately discreet," Marcus corrected with dry humor, guiding Beatrice to a chair on his right. "There is a significant difference." "There is indeed," Julian agreed, taking his place beside Cordelia. "Reticence implies an unwillingness to share. Discretion suggests judgment about appropriate timing. Our Marcus is most definitely the latter." The ease of the family interaction created an atmosphere that contrasted drastically with the tense dinners at Ashford Manor, where every word was measured and evaluated for potential embarrassment or criticism. Here there was genuine affection interwoven with light-hearted teasing. The first course was served, a velvety asparagus soup with a delicate flavor. Beatrice noticed that the plates, though obviously of superior quality, did not boast ancestral crests or excessively ornate decorations. They were simply beautiful in their elegant functionality. "Marcus mentioned you engage in charitable works," Cordelia commented as they savored the soup. "I have a particular interest in education for children of the working classes. It is a scandalously neglected area." "Cordelia established a school on a property adjacent to ours," Margaret explained with evident pride. "She teaches personally 3 days a week, causing perpetual consternation among our more traditionalist neighbors." "Let them be dismayed," Cordelia replied with unshakable serenity. "Their objections are based on obsolete precedent, not on legitimate reason. If a child possesses the capacity to learn, to deny them education due to circumstances of birth is a cruel waste of human potential." Beatrice felt immediate admiration for this woman who articulated convictions so close to her own. "I agree completely. After my mother's death, I attempted to continue the lessons she had established for children on our estate, but my cousins deemed such an activity inappropriate and explicitly forbade it." "What a pity to waste your experience thus," Julian observed, his voice carrying genuine indignation. "Education is the most valuable investment any society can make in its future." "Julian has drawn up a legal proposal to expand Cordelia's program," Marcus explained, his gaze resting briefly on Beatrice with an intensity that made her heart quicken. "We hope to establish similar schools on other estates under my management. It would be invaluable to have someone with practical experience overseeing such an expansion." The meaning behind his words did not go unnoticed. He was not merely making polite conversation, he was painting a picture of a future where Beatrice would have a significant role, a real purpose beyond merely enduring existence. "Surely Lady Beatrice has more immediate considerations," Margaret interjected, though her eyes twinkled with conspiratorial understanding, such as accustoming herself to a new environment, meeting neighbors, familiarizing herself with the estate, and deciding if she can tolerate this extraordinarily unconventional family for a prolonged period, Marcus added, his voice maintaining lightness, but his eyes conveying absolute seriousness. The second course arrived, roasted lamb with aromatic herbs accompanied by perfectly prepared seasonal vegetables. Conversation flowed naturally through various topics, from recent political developments to scientific discoveries that fascinated Julian, to an animated debate about the relative merits of different landscape architects that passionately engaged Margaret. Beatrice found herself participating with increasing ease, her opinions not merely tolerated but actively solicited. When she mentioned having read a recent treatise on innovative agricultural techniques, Marcus leaned forward with genuine interest, asking perceptive questions that demonstrated an impressive knowledge of the subject. "My father believed that women should be educated as rigorously as men," Beatrice explained when Cordelia expressed surprise at her familiarity with topics typically considered masculine. "He used to say that intelligence recognizes no gender distinctions, and to artificially limit it was an offense against natural order." "Your father was a man of remarkable wisdom," Marcus declared. "Such a philosophy regrettably remains a minority view, but those of us who embrace it must work to expand its acceptance." Marcus argued precisely this in a recent debate at the Merchants' Club, Julian observed. It caused considerable agitation among more conservative members. "Let them be agitated," Marcus replied, echoing Cordelia's earlier sentiment. "Progress rarely occurs through passive conformity." After dinner, they retired to a smaller drawing room, more intimate than the typical formal salons of aristocratic estates. Cordelia sat at the pianoforte, performing a piece by Mozart with a competence that evidenced years of dedicated practice. Margaret settled by the window with her embroidery, though Beatrice noted that the pattern she created was a modern geometric design rather than conventional florals. Marcus guided Beatrice to a sofa, positioned to enjoy both the music and the view of the moonlit gardens through the wide windows. He sat respectfully distant, yet close enough for private conversation beneath the cover of Cordelia's music. "I hope it was not excessively overwhelming," he said softly. "My family can be intensely welcoming, and I understand you may need time to adjust." "It was not overwhelming," Beatrice assured him, surprising herself with the absolute sincerity of her words. "It was invigorating. I had forgotten how stimulating genuine conversation can be when one is not constantly guarding every word against potential offense." "You should never guard your words here." Marcus turned slightly to face her more directly. "One of the freedoms my non-traditional position affords is the ability to create an environment where people express themselves authentically. But surely you cannot be entirely immune to social judgment, Beatrice protested softly. Your position in business must require certain conformities. In business, yes. I practice necessary diplomacy. His smile held self-conscious irony. But in my home, among those I choose for my intimate circle, I insist on authenticity. Life is too brief to waste it maintaining facades. Julian joined them, carrying a glass of port for Marcus and a glass of sherry for Beatrice. Forgive the intrusion, but Marcus has a tendency to monopolize interesting conversations. As a solicitor, I feel compelled to intervene. Julian fears I might say something legally compromising, Marcus translated with obvious affection. He has saved me from multiple verbal indiscretions over the years. Only 2, Julian corrected, and both were easily remedied with appropriate diplomacy. He turned to Beatrice, his expression becoming more serious. Lady Beatrice, I must mention that Marcus has requested I prepare specific legal documents. With your permission, I would like to discuss them briefly. Beatrice felt apprehension clench her stomach. Legal documents? Nothing sinister, Marcus hastened to assure her. Merely practical protections. Julian has prepared a document guaranteeing that, regardless of your final decision regarding my proposal, you will have access to sufficient funds to establish yourself independently, should you wish. I do not understand, Beatrice said slowly. Why would you provide such a thing? Because I wish your decision to be entirely free of financial coercion, Marcus explained, his voice carrying an intensity that made Beatrice grasp how important this was to him. If you agree to marry me, it must be because you genuinely wish to do so, not because your alternative situation would be untenable. Julian handed her a folded document. This guarantees you an annual income of £500, sufficient to maintain you comfortably in your own residence with appropriate staff. It is unconditional and irrevocable. Beatrice accepted the document with trembling hands, barely able to process what she was hearing. £500 annually represented genuine independence, freedom from her cousin's control, the ability to live with dignity on her own terms. This is extraordinary, she whispered. But why would you do such a thing for someone you barely know? Because I know you better than you imagine. Marcus leaned slightly forward, and there was a vulnerability in his eyes she had not seen before. And because I perfectly understand how a lack of financial resources can imprison a person in intolerable circumstances. My mother faced such choices. I will never allow anyone under my protection to face a similar impossibility. Marcus, Cordelia called softly from the pianoforte. Perhaps it is appropriate to allow Lady Beatrice some time to process these developments. It has been a considerably intense day. Marcus assented immediately, drawing back respectfully. Naturally. Forgive my excessive eagerness. I have a tendency to approach important matters with an intensity that can be overwhelming. It was not overwhelming, Beatrice assured him again, though this time her voice trembled slightly. It was simply, unexpected. For so many years I have grown accustomed to expecting cruelty or, at best, indifference. Kindness of this magnitude is disconcerting. Margaret materialized beside the sofa, offering a supportive arm. Come, let me accompany you back to your chambers. You may reflect in privacy, and tomorrow everything will seem clearer. As she ascended the staircase beside Margaret, Beatrice allowed herself to look back once. Marcus remained at the entrance to the drawing room, watching her with an expression that mingled hope and apprehension. When their eyes met, he offered a small encouraging smile, then turned respectfully, allowing her privacy. In her chambers, Margaret helped her undress, her skilled hands working buttons and ties while maintaining light, comforting conversation. When Beatrice was finally in her chemise, Margaret hesitated at the door. He speaks the truth, you know, she said softly. Marcus would never offer something he did not intend to honor completely. If he says he wishes to marry you, it is because he genuinely believes you are exactly whom he has sought. After Margaret withdrew, Beatrice moved to the window, observing the moon-drenched gardens. In her hands, she held both the legal document and the ring Marcus had offered earlier, forgotten in her initial refusal to accept it. For the first time in 6 long years, she contemplated a future that contained not just survival, but the genuine possibility of happiness. The following morning dawned with a soft mist enfolding the gardens, creating an ethereal atmosphere that Beatrice observed from her window. She had slept better than in years, cradled not only by the physical comfort of the luxurious bed, but by the surprising sense of security that permeated every corner of this extraordinary house. The legal document rested on the writing desk, beside the sapphire ring that now caught the morning light in brilliant facets. A discreet knock at the door announced Mary, a young lady's maid of gentle features, whom Mrs. Hardcastle had assigned to attend Beatrice. Her movements were efficient yet unhurried, as she prepared the morning dress and helped Beatrice with her toilette. Unlike the maids at Ashford Manor, Mary conversed naturally, mentioning that the gardens were particularly beautiful under the morning mist, and that Mrs. Cordelia frequently walked through them before breakfast. When Beatrice descended, she discovered that only Marcus awaited in the breakfast room, seated by the window with an open newspaper before him and a cup of coffee releasing aromatic steam. He rose immediately upon seeing her, folding the newspaper with economic precision. "Good morning, Lady Beatrice. I hope you rested well." His voice possessed a softer quality in the morning, less formal than the night before. "My sisters are not morning people by nature. I usually take breakfast alone, but your company is an unexpected and welcome gift." "Good morning, Mr. Thornton." Beatrice accepted the chair he pulled out for her, acutely aware of how close they were in this unwitnessed intimacy. "I slept extraordinarily well, I must confess." "Marcus," he corrected gently, resuming his own seat, "if we are to consider a matrimonial union, excessive formalities seem unnecessary, would you not agree?" The use of his first name created an intimacy that simultaneously pleased and disquieted Beatrice. "Then you must call me Beatrice, though I must admit such familiarity requires considerable adjustment." A servant appeared, with a selection of fresh bread, sliced ham, eggs prepared in various ways, and seasonal fruits. Marcus served her personally, attentive yet not overbearing, allowing her to choose what she wished without imposition. "I have a proposal for today," he said as they both began to eat. "If you are inclined, I thought I would show you the estate properly. Not just Margaret's gardens, though they are certainly worthy of prolonged exploration, but also the farmland, the village under my management, and, if you are interested, the small school Cordelia established." Beatrice felt curiosity stir. "I would like that very much. I confess I have difficulty grasping the full extent of your properties merely from the views from the windows." "Excellent. I will arrange for an open carriage, should the weather permit. But I must warn you," he paused, his eyes meeting hers with characteristic intensity, "that such an excursion will certainly generate comments among the neighborhood. A single young lady visiting the estate of a coveted bachelor inevitably sparks speculation." "Speculation you presumably wish to encourage," Beatrice observed, surprising herself with her own audacity. Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his serious face into something extraordinarily attractive. "I am not a man given to unnecessary subterfuge. If I intend to court you properly, doing so under public observation seems more honorable than secret meetings that could compromise your reputation." "My reputation is already considerably compromised by the simple fact of my being here," Beatrice pointed out. "My cousins have certainly spread a particular narrative about the circumstances of my arrival." "Let them speak." Marcus set down his cup with controlled decision. "Your presence here, under the appropriate chaperonage of my sisters, is perfectly respectable, and when we announce our engagement, any malicious speculation will be silenced by the reality of our union." "When we announce," Beatrice repeated softly. "Not if." He met her gaze without hesitation. "I have a well-founded hope that you will choose to accept my proposal, but I recognize that you need time to know me properly. I am not so arrogant as to assume that my desire automatically guarantees your consent." His honesty was simultaneously disconcerting and deeply appealing. Beatrice found herself wanting to believe those words, in that future he painted with such quiet certainty. After breakfast, Marcus guided her through the gardens to where an open carriage awaited, prepared according to his instruction. It was not an ostentatious vehicle designed to impress observers, but a well-built and comfortable conveyance, with soft leather-upholstered seats and a retractable hood that allowed an unobstructed view of the surrounding landscape. Marcus helped her ascend, his hands firm and respectful, before settling beside her. The proximity in the confined space of the carriage made Beatrice acutely aware of his physical presence, his warmth, the subtle scent of soap and something indefinably masculine. As they passed through the gates of the main estate, Marcus began to recount the history of the land. He had acquired the estate 8 years prior, when he was still considered a presumptuous arriviste by the local aristocracy. The land was in a deplorable state, neglected by the previous owner, who viewed it merely as a source of income without corresponding investment. "I spent the first year simply learning," Marcus explained as the carriage followed well-maintained lanes flanked by verdant fields. "I spoke with farmers who had worked the land for generations, with their children who had inherited practical knowledge. I discovered they possessed extraordinary wisdom regarding crop rotation, soil management, efficient irrigation. They simply had never had an owner willing to listen to them." "And you listened," Beatrice said, admiration coloring her voice. "I listened and implemented their suggestions. I provided better tools, repaired cottages that were in disgraceful condition, established a profit-sharing system that directly rewarded their hard work." Marcus gestured towards the fields where laborers worked with visible efficiency. The result was a dramatic increase in productivity and, more importantly, in satisfaction. Men work better when they feel their effort is valued and justly rewarded. They passed cottages that evidenced unusual care. Roofs were in good repair, small but well-tended gardens flourished before each dwelling. Children played with healthy, well-fed appearances. Several people waved upon recognizing Marcus's carriage, and he returned each greeting with genuine familiarity, often calling them by name. "You know your tenants personally," Beatrice observed with growing surprise. "How could I effectively manage an estate without knowing those who make it prosper?" Marcus turned to face her. "They are people, Beatrice, not merely resources to be exploited. Each possesses a history, aspirations, challenges. Understanding this makes me not only a better landowner, but a better man." The absolute sincerity in his voice removed any lingering doubt that his actions were merely performative. This was a man who genuinely believed in universal human dignity, independent of class or social position. Cordelia's school was situated in a well-maintained stone building that had originally served as a barn. Marcus explained that his sister had personally supervised the conversion, ensuring that the space was both functional and welcoming. Large windows allowed abundant light, and as they entered, Beatrice saw rows of simple but sturdy desks, occupied by approximately 20 children of varying ages. Cordelia was at the front of the room, writing on a blackboard, but she turned upon hearing the door. Her face lit up genuinely. "Marcus, Beatrice, what a delightful surprise. Children, make your proper bows and curtsies. This is Mr. Thornton, owner of these lands, and Lady Beatrice Ashford, our special guest." The children rose in unison, performing bows and curtsies with a coordination that suggested regular practice. But there was no civility in their gestures, only respectful courtesy. Their eyes shone with healthy curiosity. "Continue with your studies," Cordelia instructed softly. "I shall merely be conversing briefly with our visitors." She approached them, wiping chalk from her hands onto a practical apron that protected her dress. "Forgive my appearance. Teaching is a deliciously messy occupation." "You are absolutely radiant," Marcus assured her, with evident fraternal affection. "Passion always beautifies more effectively than ornamentation." Cordelia guided them briefly around the room, explaining the curriculum she had developed. It was not merely basic reading and arithmetic, though it certainly included that. There was also history, geography, fundamentals of natural science. Books lined shelves along the wall, not expensive volumes, but practical editions carefully selected for educational content. Many of these children will eventually work in positions requiring literacy and numeracy, Cordelia explained. But beyond practical preparation, they deserve to understand the world beyond their immediate circumstances. Knowledge expands possibilities. Beatrice felt emotion clench her throat. It was exactly the philosophy her own mother had embraced, a conviction Beatrice had tried to honor before being prevented by her cousins. "It is extraordinary," she murmured. "What you have accomplished here is truly remarkable." "It could be expanded considerably with appropriate assistance," Cordelia said, her eyes meeting Marcus's with obvious meaning. "A person with experience in establishing educational programs would be invaluable." Marcus gently touched Beatrice's elbow. "We shall let Cordelia return to her pupils. But I hope you have seen enough to understand that here, significant purpose is not denied to those willing to embrace it." They continued their tour, visiting the village where Marcus was clearly respected and genuinely appreciated. Shopkeepers greeted him with familiarity. Mothers holding babies thanked him for improvements he had implemented. Elderly men seated outside the local tavern raised their tankards in friendly salute. "You are not merely a landowner to them," Beatrice observed as they returned to the carriage. "You are part of their community." "I learned early that wealth accumulated through exploitation is fragile and morally corrupt." Marcus helped her ascend again, then settled close enough for their shoulders to almost touch. "Genuine and sustainable prosperity requires everyone to prosper together." The journey back to the manor was more silent, but not uncomfortably so. Beatrice processed everything she had witnessed, reconciling the reality of this extraordinary man with the expectations she had carried regarding men of wealth and position. "You have questions," Marcus said finally, not as an interrogation but as an observation. "I can see thoughts working behind your eyes." Beatrice turned to face him directly. "Why did you choose me? With all you have built, your principles, your position, surely you could have had your pick of women who would bring advantageous connections, useful alliances." Marcus held her gaze, and there was a vulnerability in those green eyes that made Beatrice's heart quicken. "Because I spent years building a material empire, but neglecting to build a life that would make such an empire meaningful. Women who sought me saw only wealth, an opportunity for social advancement. None saw the man behind the achievements." He paused, his hand moving as if to reach for hers, but stopping respectfully. "When I read that anonymous letter, describing a woman of quiet strength who endured adversity with dignity, who maintained kindness despite systemic cruelty, I recognized something essential. I recognized a soul that understood that true worth does not reside in social approval or external conformity, but in internal character and personal integrity." You romanticize what may simply be resignation," Beatrice whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "No," Marcus said firmly. "I have seen resignation in the eyes of men defeated by life. Your eyes contain determination, a strength that simply awaits the opportunity to express itself fully. I wish to be the one who offers you such an opportunity, not out of charity, but out of a mutual recognition of complementary souls." The carriage drew to a halt before the manor, but neither of them moved immediately. In that suspended moment, Beatrice allowed herself to truly consider the impossible, that this extraordinary man genuinely saw her, valued her, desired her not despite her circumstances, but because of the strength those circumstances had forged within her. "I need more time," she finally said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You have all the time you need," Marcus assured her, alighting first and extending his hand to assist her. "There is no rush. Building a solid foundation for a matrimonial union requires patience and genuine mutual understanding." But when her fingers touched his, Beatrice felt a spark of something that transcended rational considerations, something that suggested her heart might already be beginning to make a decision her mind still hesitated to fully embrace. The following 3 days unfolded with a dreamlike quality that Beatrice barely dared to believe was real. Each morning she awoke in her blue suite with momentary disbelief, expecting the kindness that surrounded her to reveal itself as a cruel illusion. But consistently, reality confirmed itself through small gestures that accumulated into irrefutable evidence of genuine acceptance. Marcus had established a pattern of spending part of each morning in her company, always respecting appropriate proprieties. Margaret or Cordelia invariably accompanied them, but their presence was discreet, allowing for conversations that gradually deepened their mutual understanding. He spoke of his ambitions to expand his textile operations by incorporating innovative techniques that would improve conditions for workers while increasing efficiency. Beatrice shared memories of her childhood, of parents whose love and mutual respect had shaped her expectations of how true partnerships ought to function. On the afternoon of the third day, Beatrice found herself alone in the library, absorbed in a volume on French agricultural techniques that Marcus had recommended. The door opened softly and she looked up to find not Marcus but Julian, carrying a leather portfolio that identified his visit as related to legal matters. "Lady Beatrice, forgive the intrusion," he said, his voice carrying unusual hesitation. "I have a matter of a delicate nature that I must discuss with you." Beatrice marked her page, curiosity mingling with apprehension. "Naturally, Mr. Whitmore, pray be seated." Julian settled into the armchair opposite, placing the portfolio on the low table between them. His fingers drummed briefly on the leather before he met her eyes. "I have received correspondence from your cousins, more specifically, from their solicitor." The name Ashford was enough to make Beatrice's stomach clench uncomfortably. "What kind of correspondence?" "They demand your immediate return, citing concern for your reputation and well-being." Julian opened the portfolio, withdrawing a document which he extended to her. "They also imply that Marcus has acted inappropriately by keeping you here without a suitable chaperone, threatening to imply public scandal should you not be returned immediately." Beatrice read the letter, recognizing the flowery prose characteristic of the Ashfords' solicitor, but detecting beneath it Percival's familiar venom. They did not wish for her return out of genuine concern. They wished it because her prolonged absence threatened to transform their cruel farce into something entirely different, possibly advantageous for her. "I will not return," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice, not voluntarily. "I did not expect you would wish to do so." Julian leaned forward, his expression becoming more intense. "But I must warn you that legally, your position is complicated. You are of age, yes, but without independent means or an alternative guardian, your cousins can create considerable difficulties." "Unless I accept Marcus's proposal," Beatrice concluded softly, "matrimony would transfer your legal guardianship from your cousins to your husband," Julian confirmed. "But I do not mention this to pressure you. Marcus would be furious if he knew I suggested such a thing. I mention it only to ensure you comprehend your options fully." Beatrice gazed at the document in her hands, feeling the weight of a decision she had postponed for days. The freedom Marcus had offered through that financial donation was real and generous. But even £500 annually would not protect her from a determined campaign by her cousins to drag her name through public scandal. "Does Marcus know of this letter?" she asked. "Not yet. It arrived with the morning delivery, and he left early for a business meeting on the adjacent estate." Julian hesitated. "Lady Beatrice, may I speak frankly?" "Please do." "Marcus is a man of deep convictions and unquestionable integrity. He is also a man who, once having determined a course of action, pursues it with a determination that can be formidable." Julian chose his words carefully. "He wishes to marry you because he genuinely believes you are precisely the partner he has sought, but he is also pragmatic enough to recognize that marriage offers legal protection that no other solution can provide." "Are you suggesting his interest is merely protective?" Beatrice felt something clench in her chest at the possibility. "No," Julian said emphatically. "I have known Marcus for 5 years. I've worked closely with him on countless transactions. I have never seen him look at any woman the way he looks at you. There is reverence in his eyes, but also something deeper, something that dangerously resembles nascent devotion." He paused. "I mention pragmatism only because I know Marcus will hesitate to pressure you, even when such pressure is necessary for your protection. He will value your freedom of choice above your safety, and that, while noble, can be dangerous given the circumstances." Before Beatrice could reply, voices in the corridor announced Marcus's return. He entered the library with characteristic energy, stopping abruptly upon seeing Julian with his open legal portfolio. "What has happened?" The question was directed at Julian, but his eyes moved immediately to Beatrice, assessing her expression with obvious concern. Julian silently handed him the letter. Beatrice watched as Marcus read, seeing the muscles in his jaw progressively tighten. When he finished, his hand slightly crumpled the paper before he forced himself to place it carefully on the table. "You will not return," he declared, not as a question but as absolute certainty. "I will not permit you to be handed back to people who have treated you with such systematic cruelty." "You have no legal authority to prevent it," Beatrice pointed out softly, though her heart quickened at the protective ferocity in his voice. "Then we shall create such authority." Marcus turned to Julian. "How long would it take to prepare marriage documents? Can we obtain a special license?" "Marcus," Beatrice rose, approaching him with a determined step. "You cannot make such a decision on my behalf, no matter how well-intentioned." He paused, clearly forcing himself to control an intensity that threatened to overpower his judgment. When he spoke again, his voice was more controlled. "You are right. Forgive me. My protective inclination sometimes overrides my respect for appropriate autonomy." "But I appreciate the impulse," Beatrice admitted, touching his arm lightly. The contact, though brief, sent a sharp awareness through her. "There is value in being defended, in having someone willing to fight for my protection. For years, no one has done that." Marcus covered her hand with his, preventing her from withdrawing. "Then permit me to continue to do so, not as an arrogant proprietor assuming control, but as a partner offering support." His eyes sought hers with a vulnerability that completely disarmed her. "Beatrice, during these days, every conversation only confirms my initial conviction. You are precisely the woman I desired, without knowing I was looking for. Your intelligence, your quiet strength, your compassion, that has survived years of treatment that would have embittered others. I admire you deeply." "Admiration is a fragile foundation for matrimony," Beatrice whispered, but her hand remained beneath his. "Then let us call it by its true name." Marcus took another step closer, the proximity making Beatrice's heart race dangerously. "I am falling in love with you. Perhaps I have already fallen completely, only refusing to admit it for fear of frightening you. Each morning I wake anticipating our conversation. Each night I withdraw to my chambers, wishing our time together could have been extended further. When you read in the library, I find myself observing your expressions changing with the content, fascinated by every thought that crosses your face." Tears stung Beatrice's eyes. "How can you be certain? We have known each other only days." "Because I recognize in you something essential that I sought, and because I believe, hopefully, that perhaps you feel something similar." His free hand lifted, hesitating near her face. "May I?" Beatrice nodded, barely able to breathe, and his fingers touched her cheek with a gentleness that undid her. "Beatrice, I will marry you tomorrow, if you permit it, not only to protect you from your cousins, but because I do not wish to waste any more time apart from you. But if you need more time, I will fight your cousins through any legal means available until you are ready." "And if I were never ready?" she asked, needing to know. "Then I would continue fighting until my last breath, because your happiness and freedom are worth such an effort." His voice carried absolute conviction. "But I would wait eternally if necessary, for the possibility that you might eventually choose to come to me freely." Beatrice closed her eyes, allowing tears to finally fall. For 6 years, she had learned not to trust kindness, to question every gentle gesture as a possible preamble to cruelty. But this man, with his unwavering honesty and carefully revealed vulnerability, was systematically demolishing every defense she had built. "I am afraid," she admitted, opening her eyes to find his patiently waiting. "Afraid to believe that this is real, that I will not wake to discover it was a cruel illusion." "Then permit me to spend every day proving its reality." Marcus took her other hand, holding both of hers between his. "I do not ask for your answer now. Your cousins can wait as long as necessary. Julian will find a way to legally delay them. But permit me to continue courting you appropriately, demonstrating through consistent actions that my words possess genuine substance." Julian, who had remained discreetly silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "I can respond to the Ashfords' solicitors by indicating that Lady Beatrice is under proper protection, and that any future communication should be directed through me as her legal representative. That should buy you considerable time." Marcus turned to him gratefully. "Do so immediately, and investigate what other legal resources we have available." After Julian withdrew, Marcus gently guided Beatrice back to the sofa, settling respectfully beside her, but keeping their hands joined. "There is something I wish to show you, something that may help you understand why this is not a passing impulse." He retrieved a leather wallet from his inner coat pocket, opening it to reveal a painted miniature. Beatrice leaned closer, studying the portrait of a middle-aged woman with features that resembled Marcus, gentle yet determined eyes, a smile that suggested strength tempered by compassion. "My mother," Marcus said softly, "painted 2 years before her death. She made me promise that I would not marry for convenience or social pressure. She said that she and my father had had a marriage based on mutual respect and genuine affection, and that I should not accept anything less." His fingers traced the image reverently. "She also said that when I found the right woman, I would recognize her because she would be my equal, not in social position or wealth, but in character and inner strength." He closed the wallet, turning his full attention to Beatrice. "When I read that anonymous letter, when I investigated your story, when I finally saw you descend from that carriage with determination in your eyes, despite the fear I also saw there, I knew I had found the woman my mother described, my equal in all that truly matters." Beatrice held his face between her hands, mirroring his earlier gesture. "Marcus Thornton, if I accept your proposal, it will not be out of fear of my cousins or gratitude for your protection. It will be because, in these brief days, you have begun to make me believe that perhaps I deserve the kind of happiness I always thought was beyond my reach." "You deserve all the happiness this world can offer," he said with fierce intensity, "and I will spend every day of my life striving to provide it." The library door opened abruptly, and Margaret entered with characteristic energy, stopping upon seeing the intimacy of their position. "Oh, forgive me, I must return later." "No," Beatrice said, reluctantly moving away from Marcus. "In fact, your presence is timely. I have a question that requires a feminine perspective." Margaret approached, curiosity evident. "Anything I can help with?" Beatrice took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "If I were to accept your brother's proposal, how quickly could we proceed? Are there legal or social impediments that would require a prolonged wait?" Margaret's face lit up gloriously. "With a special license, which Julian can obtain within 2 days, we could hold a ceremony almost immediately. Marcus has his own chaplain on the estate, so location would not be an obstacle." Marcus had risen, looking at Beatrice with ill-concealed hope. "Are you saying—" "I am saying," Beatrice interrupted, rising to face him directly, "that I would like to accept your proposal. Not because my cousins compel me, but because—" Beatrice's decision was not made out of simple desperation or gratitude, but out of a gradual recognition of something she had believed impossible. A man who saw her truly, not through the distorted lenses of social prejudice, but with an extraordinary clarity that penetrated to the very core of who she really was. In the following 2 days, while Julian worked to obtain the special license and prepare the necessary legal documents, Beatrice found herself observing Marcus with a new perspective, seeking flaws or inconsistencies that would reveal deceit beneath the seemingly genuine surface. She found none. On the contrary, each interaction revealed additional layers of character that only deepened her growing admiration. The morning after her acceptance, Marcus had awakened before dawn to personally accompany a group of workers repairing a damaged roof on a family cottage on the estate. When Beatrice descended for breakfast, Mrs. Hardcastle casually remarked that the master frequently participated in such work, insisting that a practical understanding of his tenants' needs was essential for effective management. "Some landowners send their agents and never dirty their own hands," the housekeeper observed with evident approval in her voice. "Mr. Thornton believes that if one asks others to work on his land, one must be willing to work alongside them." When Marcus returned some hours later, with mud streaks on his boots and hair disheveled by the wind, Beatrice felt something clench in her chest. He had not undertaken such work to impress her or create an appearance of virtue. He had done it simply because it was who he was, principles consistently translated into actions. Cordelia, enthusiastically involved herself in the preparations, though the wedding was a discreet ceremony by deliberate choice. "You do not need an elaborate spectacle to validate a union," she had said when Beatrice expressed concern about the modesty of the celebration. "You only need witnesses who truly love you and wish for your happiness. Everything else is social vanity." Margaret, in turn, had taken on the personal mission of ensuring Beatrice had a suitable gown. "I will not accept objections," she had declared when Beatrice tried to protest. "You have the right to feel beautiful on your wedding day, and my dressmaker will produce something that will perfectly complement your natural grace." The gown, when it arrived on the morning of the ceremony, was a masterpiece of elegant simplicity. Not the excessive layers of lace and ornamentation that characterized traditional wedding gowns, but creamy silk with delicate silver thread embroidery that softly caught the light. The cut enhanced Beatrice's figure without uncomfortably restricting her, celebrating her curves instead of attempting to hide them. "You are absolutely stunning," Margaret whispered when Beatrice emerged from her chambers completely prepared. Tears shimmered in the young woman's eyes. Marcus will be speechless. The small chapel on the estate was a simple stone structure that served both the workers and the Thornton family. Worn wooden pews bore witness to decades of use, and modest stained glass windows filtered the afternoon sunlight in colorful patterns onto the stone floor. There were no elaborate flowers or ostentatious decorations, just discreet arrangements of white roses from Margaret's gardens. When Beatrice entered beside Cordelia, who had generously offered to accompany her to the altar, her eyes met Marcus's immediately. He awaited by the priest, formally dressed in impeccable black that emphasized his broad shoulders and confident posture. But when he saw her, his carefully maintained composure visibly wavered. His eyes widened, and Beatrice saw emotion cross his face so intensely that she felt her own tears threaten. Julian stood beside him as a witness, and behind them sat approximately 20 people, an eclectic mix that perfectly represented Marcus's philosophy. There were Edmund and Henry, his brothers who had travelled hastily from Manchester and Liverpool upon receiving the news. There was also Mrs. Hardcastle and several senior members of the estate staff. There were neighbours whom Marcus considered genuine friends regardless of their social positions. And there were, touchingly, 2 children from Cordelia's school who had apparently begged to witness their benefactor's wedding. Beatrice walked the short aisle with steps that began hesitantly, but became progressively firmer. When she reached Marcus, he extended his hand with a gesture that trembled slightly, revealing that even his characteristic confidence was pierced by the emotion of the moment. "You are extraordinary," he murmured, when she placed her hand in his words audible only to her. There are no adequate words. The priest, an elderly man with a kind face who clearly knew Marcus well, began the ceremony with appropriate simplicity. His words on marital commitment emphasized partnership, mutual respect, and support through life's vicissitudes, resonating with the philosophy Marcus and Beatrice had discussed during their conversations over the past few days. When it came time for the vows, Marcus turned to face her completely, his hands holding hers with a firmness that simultaneously conveyed strength and vulnerability. His vows were traditional in structure, but personalized in delivery, each word spoken with an intensity that made Beatrice feel as if it were just the 2 of them in the chapel. "I, Marcus Jonathan Thornton, take you, Beatrice Catherine Ashford, as my lawful wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When it was her turn, Beatrice found that her voice, which she had feared might fail, emerged clear and steady. There was power in uttering those words, in deliberately choosing this future, after years of having no choice whatsoever over the circumstances of her life. "I, Beatrice Catherine Ashford, take you, Marcus Jonathan Thornton, as my lawful husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do us part." The ring Marcus slipped onto her finger was his mother's, the sapphire catching the candlelight, and stained glass with a deep luster. Beatrice felt the weight not only of the metal and precious stone, but of the meaning it carried, a legacy from an extraordinary woman passed on to the one her son had chosen as his partner. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest announced with evident satisfaction. "Mr. Thornton, you may kiss your bride." Marcus hesitated briefly, his eyes seeking hers with a silent question. Beatrice nodded almost imperceptibly, and he leaned down, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that contrasted with the obvious strength in his body. The kiss was chaste, appropriate for a public setting, but even that brief touch sent a keen awareness through her that promised depths of intimacy yet to be explored. When they parted, modest applause filled the chapel, and Beatrice saw that many present discreetly wiped away tears. Margaret wept openly, without any shame, and even Julian, typically reserved, smiled with genuine satisfaction. The celebration that followed was deliberately simple, held in Margaret's oriental garden, where tables had been arranged under perfectly clear weather. There was no elaborate orchestra, only a local musician playing cheerful melodies on a violin. The food was abundant, but not ostentatious, dishes prepared with local ingredients that celebrated delicious simplicity over excessive presentation. Marcus kept Beatrice close throughout the celebration, but not possessively. His hand rested lightly on her back, a comforting yet not restrictive presence. He introduced her to each person present individually, sharing specific details that demonstrated genuine knowledge about their lives and circumstances. "Mrs. Beatrice should meet Mr. Harrison," he said, guiding her to an elderly man with workers' calloused hands. "He has managed our crop operations for 15 years and possesses knowledge of crop rotation that surpasses any academic treatise I have ever read." The man blushed under the praise, but met Beatrice's eyes with a dignity she immediately respected. "My lady, congratulations. Mr. Thornton chose well, we can all see that." Such interactions repeated continually, each one revealing something more about the man she had just married. Marcus not only knew the names of his workers, but details about their families, aspirations, challenges, and most importantly, he treated each person with genuine respect that completely transcended class barriers. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Marcus found a moment to guide Beatrice to a more private part of the garden, away from the laughter and conversations of the remaining guests. "How do you feel?" he asked, turning to face her in the soft twilight. "It has been quite a day." "I feel as though I have awakened into a life I thought was beyond my reach," Beatrice admitted, allowing herself to lean slightly against him as he opened his arms in a silent invitation.